Hi, welcome back to another special broadcast of The Unknown. My name is Michael Volpe. I'm in Chicago, Illinois. In Cook County, that's michaelvolpe.substack.com. And my broadcast partner, Richard Luthman, LUTHMANN.substack.com from Lee County, Florida. And we're joined by phone by State Senator Wendy Rogers from Arizona. And State Senator, earlier this month, I think it was the Judiciary Committee, you guys held a hearing for a set of bills including, I think, like a slate of family court bills, right?
Yes, thanks for having me on. I chair the Judiciary and Elections Committee and am joined by my great colleague, Mark Finchem, Fincagm, who's also a rural senator and is geographically next door to my district. And I have co-sponsored a number of his bills on family courts, which have really become corrupt in Arizona.
So when you say corrupt, they had the joint legislative task force. I don't think you were on it, but what do you know about, like, if you wanted to explain in like a minute or so, what's the
Sure.
problem? What's the problem?
Finchem held 40 hours of testimony over the off season when we were out of session. And essentially it boils down to the fact that the judges in these family courts are quote unquote sort of in cahoots with the therapists that they restrict families to and the attorneys that they restrict families to. And so much so that they're not only extraordinarily expensive, but they're sort of in this racket to prolong the proceedings into months and years. And what ends up happening is these hapless parents, moms and dads, have to spend massive amounts of cash, in some cases mortgaging their homes, shelling out hundreds of thousands of dollars. And these bills that Finchem has brought forward, one of them, I actually queried one of the testifiers who was against it, and he was out of the room, and I just really torched this one testifier who was representing the courts because she said, oh, the bill was to give these parents a jury trial option instead of just being at the whim of the judge. And so this testifier was going on and on about how much it would cost the state to have a jury trial and how judges were subject matter experts and jurors could never be subject matter experts. And I just tore her up because I said jurors are the common man's last resort. They're moms, they're dads themselves, and they don't need to be a subject matter expert, and seldom are jurors subject matter experts. They're workaday men and women of the people. And I said, and when you tell me how much it's going to cost the state, what about how much it's costing these families who are, and by the way, they were in the room and they had just testified and they were sitting up front and I could see their faces. These people have been completely taken advantage of and have been sort of, at the whim of the state. And it just, I will just sort of punctuate this to conclude to say that it is not up to the judiciary system to quote unquote fix a marriage or fix a family. That is not their role. And what they have done is they've become a runaway entity where they've had all this corruption and inside scam that it's completely hurt workaday families.
All right, and I think the interaction you were talking about is with a woman named Jordan Clark, and I've got it off. Let me play it. It goes for a couple minutes.
I think she wants to say one more thing. I don't know the protocol for that, Chairwoman.
Do your testimony, and then, did you already testify?
Yeah.
That, so, unable, sorry.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Rogers and committee members. My name is Jordy Clark, representing the Arizona Association of Counties on behalf of the county attorneys. We respectfully opposed SB 1330. Family law cases, particularly those involving children, require specialized knowledge and training that juries do not always possess. Family court judges are uniquely experienced in child welfare, high conflict family dynamics, and the nuanced application of the best interests of the child standard. Expecting juries without this background to make informed decisions risk outcomes that may not adequately protect children or families. Jury trials would also significantly delay urgent decisions in cases involving abuse, neglect, or substance misuse. These matters often require swift judicial action to ensure child safety, and introducing jury proceedings would slow the process at the very moment when time is most critical. Additionally, jury trials would expose highly sensitive family and child records to a much larger group of people. Confidentiality is essential in family court to protect the privacy, dignity, and long-term well-being of children and parents. Expanding access to those records increases the risk of unnecessary disclosure and harm. Finally, the availability of jury demands would be misused to stall proceedings, drive up litigation costs, and pressure vulnerable parties. This would clog already overburdened civil dockets and significantly increase county expenses, staffing strain, and administrative burdens without improving incomes for the children and family. And we respectfully urge the opposition of SB 1330, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are juries ever subjects that they pass judgment on?
Chairwoman Rogers, I guess it would depend on the juror, but as a whole, the attorneys believe.
Sure. I mean, the attorneys, if they're in a scam with the judges, are going to believe that. Prove me wrong.
Madam Chair.
I want an answer.
Chairwoman Rogers, at this moment, I wouldn't be able to prove without looking at a group.
And she goes on, and she never is able to answer the question. But what about like her arguments? She says it slows it. What would jury trials slow it down? Does she have a point there?
Well, I would submit to you that the process is already being dragged out on purpose. And I don't know if you noticed a different woman's voice who kept interrupting.
Mhm.
That was the militant Democrat, one of three on my committee. And this is what the side opposite does, by the way, is, they want government overreach, and they want to tell you what color of clothing to wear and what therapist to use and so on and so on. And so she kept interrupting, and I finally tersely, this happened yesterday. We had a bunch of bills to get through also. You're not recognized. You're not going to interfere. You're not going to interrupt. And this is what they do. They try to slow it down, and they try to make it emotional and say that I'm a heel, for holding the testifiers' feet to the fire. And I'm just not having it. I don't know. I could talk separately on how I run a committee, but I do not suffer fools lightly in my committee, and I don't let them interfere or get in the way of the truth.
Okay, Rich, you've got a few questions.
Well, yeah, I think that to my mind, and from what I've seen in Arizona, there are two huge obstacles that you have, and I'll ask you about both of them. One being the judiciary, and the second being who I consider to be a sadist sitting in the governor's office. How much of an obstacle are the judges themselves? We talked to Melinda Sherwood, and she basically told us, like many activists in this area say, that they send their lobbyists. The judges send their lobbyists to kill our bills. Do you feel that the judges and their allies are working against these bills, the 1330, the 1329, 1328? And what are you doing to counter that?
Overall, what you're really asking me is, is the state government's working the will of the people? And what we've done, I mean, I'm more into the elections and judiciary. Let me step inside. Sorry, angle. And I have long time maintained that you have to expose. And so this is what Fincham has done expertly. He has brought these families in to tell their tale of woe and get that on the record. And the more we get this on the record, in spite of the fact that we have an illegitimately elected governor, secretary of state, and moreover, attorney general, all three of the top executive positions are filled with arguably people who stole their elections. And that's a whole nother six-pack story. But this is where we find ourselves, and our constituents, especially our rural constituents who are very plugged in and very passionate, tell Fincham and Rogers, you get down to the Capitol and you represent us, and you need to keep bringing these bills forward year after year, despite the fact that they get vetoed. And oh, by the way, Wendy Rogers had more bills vetoed this past cycle than any other legislator. I had 12 bills vetoed by Hobbs, and just to get them to her desk is a Herculean effort, because of course it has to go through committee in the Senate, floor overall in the Senate, and then over to the House through committee, and then through the House floor of the overall House. So 4 hefty wickets, if you will, that a bill has to traverse through to get to the governor's desk. And Fincham and I carry a lot of legislation that's specific to our rural constituents. But back to who they are, they voted for him. They voted for me to continue to beat the drum. And so what we foresee happening in the long run, it's like the Chinese, you know, you got to play the long game. And so what we foresee happening is that we will have a new governor, Andy Biggs, replace her. And of course, he's a stalwart Freedom Caucus conservative Republican congressman at the moment, running a great race here when he's home in Arizona. And he used to be the president of our state Senate. So he has committed to audiences where I've heard him speak to getting bills signed off in his first week of once he's elected, of all these bills that get vetoed, have been getting vetoed. So again, it's a roundabout answer to your question, but with the judiciary and with the executive, the legislature is going to finally have the last say. We're the closest to the people. We are the most powerful by design, because we're the hardest to corral and gather as, you know, so many wild cats. But we do. We have a very strong Republican caucus, especially in the Senate, where we have a 2-vote edge. We have 17 Republicans and 13 Democrats. And, this is how we roll.
What I'm hearing you say, though, is it's going to take a different governor than the one you have.
Yes, and it's going to take a different House. People say, well, let's impeach Chris Mays. Let's impeach the Attorney General. Well, hello, according to the state constitution, that starts in the House. And then it would go to the Senate where, we would vote. But we don't have 2/3. Right. We don't have 2/3 majority to be able to carry that off. And so what we do is what we can do, which is hold hearings, expose, run bills, make them be written about online. I have a huge social media, 418,000 followers on X and 4 other platforms. And I put stuff out every day. I put out that video you played, mm-hmm. And every time I explain my vote or introduce a bill, it's a succinct. I'm military, so, I had to beat into me to be succinct. So I put out a 1 or 2 minute video of my testimony, and I'm telling you that resonates nationally. Right. And of course, Fincham and I were endorsed by President Trump over the years many times, so we kind of have a national platform.
Okay, Rich, you got another one?
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing, that a lot of these measures are non-starters with Katie Hobbs in the governor's mansion, and that the the plan B for an override is mathematically
Never happened.
impossible. The real plan B is to take back the governor's mansion, to take strong majorities in the House and in the Senate, and to implement these bills. So if that's going to happen, there's a strong team that's already in place. I'd like to ask you about that team that you're working with, Senator Finchem and some of the other reform-minded lawmakers, Representative Keschel, Representative Fink, and what are you doing to help propel these important issues, not only in family court, but election security and some of the other things you're working on?
Well, the meat and potatoes of leadership in the Arizona legislature is in the committee chairmanships, and especially so for the Senate, because Senate President Warren Peterson has been very emphatic in enabling us to lead and not standing in anyone's way. And so as a chairman, each chair has the authority to hear a bill or not. And so my role in arguably the most contentious and audience-filled committee, let me tell you, yesterday was quite the scene, then I have that authority to hear a bill or not. And so that's where I make those decisions on what great bills there are. And of course, I hear Finchem's bills, and I don't run as many as he does. I have different topics. But interestingly, now next week, we don't have committees because that's when the House bills come over to the Senate and vice versa. So Keschel's bills and so forth, Fink, both very strong state House reps, we will hear their bills. And so that's where, this collaborative force multiplication effect can occur.
Rich, anything else?
Yes, some may be surprised that someone known for election audits and border security is leading the charge on family court reform. Do you see a connection between these issues? And in your view, how do family rights and court accountability fit into the broader America First agenda?
I think they're linked. I myself have sponsored, 6 or 7 border security bills as a member of the Military Affairs and Border Security Committee. You just wouldn't believe the meltdown. We have disruptors in the audiences who blow whistles, who have to be taken out. Yesterday, as chairman of my committee, and I had a packed room on one of these really controversial bills. One of our senators was outing ICE's location over the summer, and so this bill, precludes you enabling someone to flee law enforcement. The place was packed, TV cameras, and then, they got up and started protesting. I had to gavel out the committee to a recess to enable law enforcement there in the Capitol to get these people out. And, it's constant. And I guess I would call it the Minneapolis effect. I mean, they're just emboldened. And I had a debrief with the Sergeant at Arms today because I have an all-day catch-up committee meeting tomorrow, and there's going to be another contentious bill that talks about having ICE at voting locations, and you can bet your bottom dollar there will be protesters, and we will be ready.
So to be clear, these people aren't classic protesters. These are paid agitators. They all have the same signs. They're all organized. They're coming with the same purpose. Is that correct?
I would say, yeah. And the first Monday of the other committee where most of my bills are heard on border security, 2 of them had legal charges filed against them. And our security at the Capitol is very good, and we have video of who these people are and can restrict them from coming in. And, we had a real row back in, what was it, 4 years ago when Roe versus Wade got got overturned in the month of June. We were finishing up the session. We had 7,000 protesters outside who were trying to bang into the Senate lobby, and the security people had the foresight to put the pins from the glass doors down into the concrete so that they couldn't barge in. And then the state police were 20 abreast in the glassed-in lobby to protect us. We were evacuated down to the tunnel between the House and Senate. We didn't end up having to go, but the tear gas was so thick and came into the chamber, we had to finish out the night till 2 in the morning in some makeshift conference room setups, back in the day, like voting manually and stuff. Because I'm telling you, you break in, we can carry, we senators. And so, if they had broken in, I can't even imagine how bad it would have been.
What do you think of the ICE agents wearing masks? And I'm assuming they're not going to try to pass a law like that, but if a bill like that
Oh,
came
they
out,
tried. I didn't even hear it, but it's ridiculous. And here's the flip side to that too.
why do you say it's ridiculous? Cops don't wear masks. No other law.
It's ridiculous to take the mask down. I agree. They need to wear a mask.
Why?
And
Cops don't wear a mask. Cops don't wear a mask. There's no other law enforcement that's.
because you have these guys and their families in danger because of how contentious all this is. They absolutely need to wear a mask. And here's the other thing. They say they're not identified. That's baloney. They have whatever law enforcement agency they're representing placarded on their front and back. And so, when the testimony by colleagues of mine start wandering into the weeds of, ICE murders people, I shut them down right away. I am not going to let the institution of the Senate have cast aspersions on law enforcement. Not going to happen in my committee.
But cops deal with gangbangers, all kinds of dangerous people, and they don't feel the need to wear a mask. It's not. I don't see how that's different from what ICE is doing.
And that's up to the police department. I absolutely support ICE wearing masks. Listen, I've had death threats. There's a guy in prison right now that had a death threat against me. And so anything we can do to help these guys avoid someone hunting. I had reporters come into my house. I had to get a restraining order. I have lived this life. And so I'm in full support of ICE being able to protect themselves in any way they can.
Rich, you got a few more questions?
Yeah. Two parts. What worries you the most, and what gives you the most hope about the country under the current administration? Whether it's the economy, whether it's cultural issues, border, what are the two things?
I'm most encouraged by the fact that we elected Donald Trump, and that they tried to steal it again, but weren't able to. And I guess what worries me is losing the majority in the Arizona legislature and/or losing the governorship again. By the way, we don't have a governor's mansion in Arizona. The governor just lives at their own house. But losing that would be absolutely devastating, and we have to ensure that the election isn't stolen. In 2022, it absolutely was, especially in Maricopa County, which is 75% of the voters live in Maricopa County. And then, of course, as you saw, the machines broke down and they used, the wrong size paper and all this kind of thing. I've seen all this stuff as the chairman of the elections committee. I've seen the data. I've seen, 6 ways to Tuesday that they cheated. Mail-in balloting is so problematic, and it lasts for a month. The voter rolls not being cleaned up. Our Secretary of State has not given the voter rolls to Pam Bondi. You have lack of chain of custody with this third-party Runbeck company. I mean, it just goes on in all the different ways that the cheating occurs. And so, we did better in 2024. We had more eyes on, and we were able to, have a better election, but it's still fraught with problems.
So you would support you support President Trump's executive order for voter ID?
Absolutely.
Do you guys have voter ID requirement in Arizona?
We do, but it's murky. It's for the. Don't quote me on this, but it's somewhat we do, but some of it's tied up in court, and so it's not clear cut.
I wanted to ask you, playing devil's advocate, I guess. You made a great argument that all other jury trials are done by citizens, but maybe the whole system is wrong. Why should she makes the argument that we should have specialized people to decide custody? Maybe the answer is more of what she's saying in other trials. Why do we need jury trials the way we have them?
Jury trials in these cases would be the last resort. They would not be pervasive, but I would say to you that when you leave it up to an all-powerful single person, a judge, that's a problem.
Right.
And these judges are not. I mean, some might be okay, but there's a dangerous chance that they would become co-opted, and Fincham has already borne this out in terms of showing what the racket scam is among the judges and the therapists and the lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I mean, I have a background as a psychiatric social worker before I became a jet pilot in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I am seeing this through that additional lens.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to add, I looked it up. And so according to Google AI, why did the Founding Fathers want jury trials? The Founding Fathers viewed this right as a cornerstone of liberty designed to prevent oppression and protect individual rights. And it is true. Judges and lawyers and social workers, they all run in the same circles. And that's where you have the oppression.
Yes, and then the longer they're in the institution, the more they have a frontal lobotomy. They just become so. And I see it in my colleagues. I've been asked, hey, Wendy, do you want to be ever Senate president or Senate majority leader or Senate whip? And I always say no, because I want to be with my people.
Right.
I have a huge diverse rural district that stretches, across 4 counties. That's where I need to be when I'm not chairing my committee and voting on bills. I need to be with my people. And if I think that sometimes my colleagues, none in specific, just in general, become so used to the sort of fraternity atmosphere at the Capitol, they lose touch. And, I don't consort with lobbyists. I don't go out to all these steak dinners and stuff, because I would rather be communicating with my people in the evenings, and we're in session Monday through Thursday. So why? Because Friday, people like me need to get back to their districts and back to their people. I have a lot of hardscrabble, really precious people, and especially if they come to the Capitol to testify on a bill. I had some come yesterday. One county supervisor quipped this. I wrote it down. It was so clever. He goes, he said, I live an hour and a half from the Capitol, and it took me 8 years to get here. And I just thought that sort of said so much on so many levels, because he should be where he has been, which is way out. He lives at Roosevelt Lake. I mean, that's a very rural area. Well, most of my stuff's rural. And, you know, we all chuckled, but it resonated in a way that I don't know if people really realized. That's where politicians need to be, is with their people and not in the ivory tower.
I wanted to also add regarding the jury trials, the idea that the judge has this like unique perspective that someone brought into a jury wouldn't have, I think is nonsense.
Agreed.
Right, the best interest standards, that can be explained, but the idea that this judge is just so much smarter than if you bring his citizens in, I think is a nonsensical order. I did reach out. The woman who Miss Clark, she's out of the office, so hopefully she'll.
She's just a tool. She just read. You realize,
Right.
She just read what she spoke, and you know, she was kind of on the lower end of the scale of being able to articulate and understand what she was articulating. There are some very sharp, smart lobbyists that we have to deal with, and yeah, it's an interesting journey. I love it though. I love it.
Rich, any other questions?
Just one point on the jury trials. If you go back and read Blackstone, the commentaries on the English law, and actually the foundational documents, the constitutional debates, the idea of the jury trial is tied to the no titles of nobility. If you read some of the old English and British types of the old English common law, it's all law lords, Lord Coke and Lord Black and Lord this one and Lord that one. And so there's a question about the common man versus the aristocratic class. Even today we hear about that, but our Constitution has in it those safeguards from the founding days, understanding that the legal profession, especially, and government itself, can become entrenched by a noble class. That's why we tried to do away with it. And that's what they saw as one of the great problems in England. So that's one of the big reasons why the jury right in both civil and criminal cases is so fundamental and important into the American way.
Amen.
My other question I wanted to ask about on topic to the family court stuff is the immunity and the absolute immunity being stripped. Now it's qualified immunity under the bill for court appointees. And we hear horror stories about judicial immunity, which is nearly absolute. Stumpy Sparkman, Mike and I talk about that all the time, famous Supreme Court case. But this bill 1329, SB 1329, strips down for qualified immunity for appointees that don't act within the scope of what they should be doing, in the scope of their authority. I think it's generally a positive thing, but there's the argument that it's going to chase away some good people too. What are your feelings on that?
Okay, does that have to do with guardians ad litem?
Yeah, and other
guardian ad litem, the court appointed, yes.
Yeah, they're a problem in our state. In fact, my husband and I fostered a young boy years ago. They had this outsized authority and voice, and and Fincham has seen this in the 40 hours of testimony. That has become a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I see him as trying to curtail that outsized impact that they have.
I've asked this not just of State Senator Fincham, but anytime I can get a state legislator in any state, why not propose a bill that outlaws all court appointees? You all seem to agree that guardian ad litem and these other appointees have all of this power, and they seem to run wild. I think that they clog up the system, they make it more complicated, they put more money into the system, and it creates this dynamic where there's too many cooks in the kitchen. You don't know
I would
agree. Would you support a bill that outlaws so that the judge can't appoint anyone?
I am not sure, but there may be something wending its way through the system on that. I'd have to get back to you or have Fincham answer you. I don't know, but philosophically, I agree.
I think the real fix, short of getting rid of court appointees, I think qualified immunity is like the right balance in terms of suing them. Because then if they commit perjury, that's what you sue them for. But you don't sue them because they didn't believe you and, and your kid really was being abused. You can't sue for something like that, a judgment. But something deliberate, then you, and look, if they're covering up, they're going to do something deliberate anyway that you can sue for. But I think to really reform the system, you eliminate or at least really curtail the judge's ability to appoint people. Rich, any last questions you got?
Well, there's the question that we usually ask our guests in closing is we ask our guests to ask themselves a question and answer that question. So do you have a question you want to ask yourself and then answer?
That we didn't ask you.
Well, I'm kind of at a loss. I question myself every day, I guess, and make sure that I don't put up with the fool's folly. Nothing comes to mind right now. I just got to kind of continue on, but I would say that persevering is really important right now, even though we think, we have a great administration in Washington, which we do. And I love the cabinet picks, especially Hegseth and Rubio and so forth. But you really have to sort of take 2 steps back and look at the big picture of where we are, not only geopolitically, but states' rights have to be exercised. And we have to understand that it really begins with us here in a state. And I would say that Arizona is at the pointy tip of the spear, and we're at ground zero here. And we realize that the country looks at us at kind of an example of the dynamic nature of, a constitutional republic. I mean, we're the last state before Hawaii and Alaska, and have a lot of hard scrabble roots. And, we were just kidding today. Someone was telling me, oh, he's a Democrat, and I go, old school Democrat, right? And the person said, yeah. And so that sort of harkens back to the ranching, the mining, that kind of rural Democrat who nonetheless took responsibility and watched after his fellow man. But it has changed so much now that you just have to kind of tease out what's important and ignore the rest. I do a lot of ignoring too, or I'd be up all night.
Right. All right. State Senator Wendy Rogers, thank you for being here.
Well, thanks. Follow me on X at Wendy Rogers AZ.
All right.